Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a massive structural problem brewing in the UK economy,
Hmm.
and it all revolves around something that sounds quite mundane: property taxes, or as they're called, business rates.
Right.
Now, if you are a small business owner, maybe a freelancer, or if you rely on flexible working spaces, this deep dive is going to be incredibly important for you to understand.
It really is.
Yeah.
This isn't just some localized dispute over a bill. We're looking at what feels like, well, an institutional crisis.
And our source material for this is pretty clear.
It is. It details a unified and, frankly, a stark warning from over 60 of the UK's leading serviced office operators.
And it's aimed directly at the government, specifically Chancellor Rachel Reeves.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to figure out how a sudden, very technical shift in tax valuation has created this genuine financial threat. It could potentially destabilize thousands of small businesses.
The scale of it is quite something.
When you look at the scope, the numbers are huge. Those 60-plus operators, they collectively support more than 27,000 businesses across the UK. It's a fundamental artery of the modern economy.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So we need to drill down into the mechanics of this reclassification. Because while business rates might sound dry, this change isn't just generating these enormous backdated bills for operators.
We're talking up to £400,000, right?
In some cases, yes, but it's also stripping away a crucial bit of government support from their tenants.
Small business rates relief.
That's the one. It's all connected.
Okay, let's jump right in then, the central conflict. This huge, sudden increase in business rates that these flexible workspace providers are facing, it all comes from the Valuation Office Agency, the VOA.
Mm.
What exactly did they change?
So the change is all about how the VOA defines the basic unit of property that can be taxed. In legal terms, it's called a hereditamент.
Okay.
For years, the industry has operated on the understanding that a flexible workspace building contained many separate rateable units.
So if I rent a little two-person office in a big co-working building,
Right.
that specific office is my rateable property. It's separate from the office next door.
That was the interpretation everyone relied on. But the VOA has fundamentally shifted its practice.
How so?
Now, they are treating the entire building with all those dozens, sometimes hundreds of individual offices as a single property for rating purposes.
Just one big unit.
One big unit. And our sources are very clear that this was done, crucially, without any meaningful consultation with the industry beforehand.
Wow. Okay, so that technical shift immediately creates a massive ripple effect.
Huge one.
Because the whole point of the Small Business Rates Relief, the SBRR, is that it's applied based on the rateable value of your small individual unit.
Exactly.
If that unit legally ceases to exist for rating purposes and it just gets absorbed into the valuation of this huge building,
Yep.
the relief disappears. Just like that. And that is the devastating immediate consequence for the tenants, for the freelancers, the startups, the small SMEs. Right. If their space is no longer separately valued, they can't claim the SBRR.
It's gone.
And just remind us how vital this relief actually is. We're not talking about a tiny discount here, are we?
Well, not at all. For a huge number of micro businesses, it's literally the difference between profit and loss.
Okay.
For properties with a rateable value below a certain threshold, let's say around £12,000, eligible businesses can get 100% relief.
100%.
Yes. So if you're a startup in London and you're paying, I don't know, £1,000 a month for your desk space, SBRR can wipe out a huge chunk of your annual costs.
But when the VOA lumps your single desk into a £500,000 building valuation,
that relief just vanishes. It's not there anymore.
that is a financial catastrophe waiting to happen. You know, you think about the small business that just signed a contract assuming that relief was baked into their budget.
It's an immediate, unbudgeted, and potentially fatal liability.
So let's look at the financial shockwaves, starting with the operators themselves. They're the ones getting the massive initial bills.
And the figures are just brutal, mainly because this is being applied retroactively.
It's not a change for next year, it's for now. Or even for last year.
Exactly. It seems to be applied to existing valuations. So operators are facing backdated bills that, as we mentioned, can be as much as £400,000.
I mean, just imagine getting a bill for nearly £500,000 for a tax change you had absolutely no warning about.
And no time to prepare for it. It's a genuine existential threat to your cash flow.
And the sector is being very clear about the domino effect this is going to create.
The warning is that we could see widespread failure across the sector. They're saying these costs can't just be absorbed, they will have to be passed on.
To the small businesses.
Inevitably,
Yeah.
either through higher rents or Well, the outright closure of centers that just can't pay those backdated charges.
So the SME tenants get hit twice.
Mm.
They're already struggling with, the general economic environment, inflation, energy costs, rising taxes, and now they face losing their rates, relief, and a rent hike from their host.
And this is where the industry voice gets very forceful. Jane Sarton, she's the executive director of the Flexible Space Association, FlexSA.
Right.
She did not mince her words on this. She highlighted the sheer urgency of it all, confirming the sudden reclassification has been introduced without consultation.
And she said it's already having an effect.
She did. She stressed that this is, and I'm quoting here, already putting the future of many workspaces in jeopardy.
And she gave that huge figure for the number of tenants affected.
She did. She stated very clearly that over 150,000 SMEs are losing the reliefs they depend on. She even said that many centers are now on the brink.
When a technical adjustment puts 150,000 livelihoods at risk, it demands some serious scrutiny.
It absolutely does.
Which brings us to the really crucial part of this, the legal justification. Why does the VOA think they can do this?
That's the pivotal question. The VOA's position is that this is necessary compliance. They say it's based on developments in case law.
Ah, so they're pointing to the courts.
Yes. Specifically rulings like a 2024 case, Prosser versus Ricketts.
And what was the gist of that ruling? What did it change?
It seems to have been about this concept of paramount control.
Paramount control.
Right. Who has the dominant right of occupation over a space? The VOA is arguing that recent judgments, like Prosser, mean they have to re-examine these flexible office agreements.
Okay.
So if the operator, say, retains the right to move the tenant from one office to another, or handles all the security, the cleaning, the IT.
All the things that make it a serviced office.
Precisely. The VOA argues that means the operator, not the tenant, is the effective occupier of the entire building.
So they're using the very terms of the flexible contracts, the things that make them so attractive to startups, to argue that the landlord is the true tenant of the whole space.
That seems to be the logic.
Yeah.
And therefore, that the individual small office isn't a separate rateable unit anymore. The case law has sort of chipped away at the old assumption that a license for a serviced office automatically created a separate tax unit for the tenant.
So the VOA is saying their hands are tied, they're just following precedent set by the courts.
That's their official line, yes.
But is it possible the operators were, benefiting from a bit of a gray area that has now been closed? We have to look at both sides.
And that's the critical point. It is possible the old system had an ambiguity that allowed relief to be granted where, technically, the legal standard for a separate tenancy wasn't rigorously met.
But the operators are pushing back hard.
Very hard. They're arguing that these court rulings don't apply to the modern serviced office model in this sweeping way the VOA is using them.
So this is a policy battle being fought with legal jargon.
It really is. The operators are basically accusing the VOA of enacting a massive tax policy change by stealth.
Saying they're removing a major established tax relief for SMEs through administrative practice instead of through proper legislation and debate in Parliament.
That is the absolute crux of the conflict. Because if an administrative body can remove access to a government-designed tax relief,
a relief meant to help small businesses grow,
just by reinterpreting case law, it highlights a profound regulatory risk for every entrepreneur in the country. It suggests government support is a lot less stable than people thought.
And if we connect this technical dispute to the bigger picture, the stakes are just enormous. This isn't just about landlords paying their rates.
No, it's about the entire ecosystem of entrepreneurship that relies on this flexible infrastructure.
The UK economy, especially post-pandemic, has leaned so heavily on flexible working.
Massively. You have over 4,000 of these flexible workspace centers across the nation. They provide essential, low-commitment, scalable space.
For freelancers, for startups, for SMEs that are trying to grow, these are businesses that deliberately choose flexible terms.
Of course. They don't have the capital or the stability to sign a 5-year traditional lease. They need that flexibility.
And if those 4,000 centers start to close or have to hike their prices to cover these bills?
The result is a sharp drop in affordable workspace. It'll hit the most vulnerable startups the hardest. The National Enterprise Network has backed this up. They've warned these changes could trigger widespread business failures.
In a sector that's still recovering from the pandemic.
Exactly. So the overall impact is, well, it's far-reaching. It stifles entrepreneurial activity. It removes affordable entry points. And it damages the high streets where these centers are often located.
Which is why the operators have moved beyond just legal arguments.
Yes, they've issued a direct political call for intervention. They're urging Chancellor Rachel Reeves to step in.
Arguing that this needs a political solution to prevent widespread closures and protect this vital sector.
Essentially, yes. They're saying the economic damage of allowing 150,000 small businesses to lose this relief far outweighs the technical compliance argument the VOA is making.
They need policy to override the administrative interpretation.
That seems to be the hope.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this? We've seen how a highly technical reclassification by the VOA has created a truly urgent financial threat.
A threat that stems from treating an entire serviced office building as a single property, based on interpretations of case law, like Prosser versus Ricketts.
And this threat hits two groups. The operators who are getting hit with these massive backdated bills up to £400,000.
And critically, the more than 150,000 SMEs who are suddenly losing access to the small business rates relief they were counting on.
It's a classic case of complex legal definitions creating profound economic instability. The industry sees it as administrative overreach.
While the VOA maintains they're just following the evolving rule of law about who has paramount control over a property.
But at the end of the day, it's a huge shift in practice applied retroactively, and it's now threatening a massive part of the UK's startup economy. And here's a final thought for you to mull over.
If a government agency can effectively remove a key small business relief, one that 150,000 businesses depend on, through an interpretation of case law, rather than a formal vote in Parliament, what does that suggest?
What does it say about the underlying fragility of tax support for entrepreneurs in these uncertain economic times?
Exactly. How can any small business plan for the future when the fundamental definition of their taxable property can just shift overnight? That lack of regulatory stability is perhaps the biggest danger of all.